The UNGA president say that the world is on the brink of a nuclear catastrophe. We are closer than at any time before in our history, and they warn that these weapons will drive the situation out of control. The UN General Assembly president has warned that the rest of the world must begin to prepare because across our world are urging their citizens to leave different countries of contention as soon as possible. You see, the government knows exactly what time it is, and they're trying to get people ready. Israel is fortifying multiple power stations across the country against new missile and rocket attacks. We're seeing project completion reports after the Army chief ordered a step up in preparations for what they consider to be a multi-front war. They know that this isn't going to be Israel versus Iran, just like it's not Russia versus Ukraine. This isn't going to be China versus Taiwan. What this is going to be is a world at conflict. We're seeing in the USA, 46% of the people, that's almost 1 out of 2 people, it is on average, renters in the US are struggling to make their ends meet. And this is according to the Harvard University of Economics. We know that with a new era of people not being able to afford or own their home, when they make it so that everybody struggles to make ends meet, they have indebted servants for the rest of their lives. 17 million adults across the country say that different increases to their cost of living have forced them to move just within the last 6-month period. That's according to the census. And we see Ukrainian drones targeting different regions in Russia in what is being considered the largest attack on Russian soil in an 18-month period. Commercial real estate prices are down sharply this year, with office buildings dropping 30%. This happened on top of declining prices, and there are nearly $1.4 trillion worth of commercial real estate loans that are coming due in the next 2-year period. Rates on commercial real estate loans have more than doubled since they were issued, and on top of this, we're seeing massive amounts of vacancies across the USA. Real estate is skyrocketing, and rent is going down. Now we have declining prices and rising rates on loans that need to be refinanced in order to be paid back. We're also seeing the largest 3-month drop in U.S. job openings on record. This has excluded the economic shutdown during COVID. And what we know is that as people struggle to make ends meet and as they work hard just to get the things done that they need to survive on a daily basis, they're not able now to get the jobs that they need to be able to support their families. Over across the ocean, we're seeing attacks on military bases in Russia, over 400 miles north of Ukraine, completely past the country of Belarus. We saw drones being launched from inside of Russia. We're seeing the Russian government there say that this has been an act of sabotage and one against the Russian state. Medvedev, the former president to Russia, and now he sits on the Security Council, he's moved on to what is being considered by U.S. strategists to be a new level of concern. He's threatening, they say, the world now with an apocalypse, just not opposing countries. I want to read to you a little bit from his Telegram post in which he says Ukrainian criminals have announced that they were approved to strike anything, and they said everything, in Russia. This, for example, he means to be Crimea. If this is true, he says, and there's no reason to doubt it, it is a direct, legally significant amount of evidence of the Western world's complicity in the war against Russia on the side of the Ukrainian state. They say that for Russia, we see an act under their legislation that every NATO country is fighting against Russia. And he says that the predictions of an apocalypse are getting closer. They warn that people will seek death during these days, but they will not find it. They will wish to die, but death will flee from them, in a famous, of course, quote of Revelations from the Bible. We're remembered as long as we disturb others, he continues to quote Lenin. Whether you like it or not, history is on our side, and we will bury you, he says in another quote. So we see what strategists inside the U.S. military and those working for the government and the Western world, we see what they say is going to be a new ramping up of the conflict that is about to come. Now, I've already talked to you about sabotage happening inside of Russia, inside of Ukraine, and across other NATO countries. I want to talk to you a little bit about sabotage that is happening in the United States of America. Over the last 48-hour period, we saw multiple warehouses and plants go up in flames. We've seen the lighting of new wildfires, and I want to tell you about one in particular, which we saw come across our desk, with multiple firefighters battling a massive recycling plant warehouse fire that had explosions in Tennessee. At the time the report came across our desk, we saw numerous firefighters working to control this fire at a recycling plastic warehouse in Newport. Witnesses say they reported heavy black smoke. Some of them say they reported vehicles fleeing the area before the smoke started. An eerie red glow could be seen from flames as what is probably poisonous materials continues to burn there. And they said they reported medium-sized explosions to authorities, but those reports never made it on local or mainstream television. Some injuries were reported, mostly due to smoke inhalation, but it just shows you that that's where we're at right now. The Secretary to the United States of America, Antony Blinken, has said that today the USA has announced, this was of course yesterday, a significant new assistance package for the country of Ukraine. This includes guided rockets, anti-armor, piercing missiles, and other munitions. They stress that this will help Ukraine's military forces defend their country's sovereignty, their territory, and their people. Now, it was about 8 months ago that I started reiterating what we kept hearing from China and Russia, and that was the call to arms for sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I said, as soon as the USA, as soon as the Western world starts to flip this script and they try to make it so that this is a war against Western territory, against Western sovereignty, that's when you're going to see what is the legal backing for a wider conflict. This is a multifaceted war. And if you know anything about gemstones or diamonds, you know that it's the facets, that's the different shapes that make a gemstone shine. Now, that means that on one stone, there can be multiple, hundreds sometimes, facets. And this is, in that regard, a multi-dimensional, multifaceted war. We're seeing the U.S. pulled militarily toward NATO. We're seeing Russia completely engage all of NATO by their backing of Ukraine. We're seeing China spend massive amounts of money in their near-daily sorties and their near-daily military trials against Taiwan. Now, at one point in time, an hour is going to go by and China is going to move on Taiwan. You just do not continue to operate in that theater of conflict that many times before you're ready to act. But then we have a whole economic war taking place. And I know that with them saying 46% of our population is struggling to make ends meet, with 1 out of 2 people right now struggling, that means they can't pay for their food, their shelter, and their fuel. We know that this is also an economic war. That's completely backed up by Russia's President Putin, by China's president, them coming forward, accepting new countries into BRICS, one-time U.S. allies moving to the BRICS nations. And then we see China stand up and say, you know what, we need a new currency. We need a currency that is backed by gold or by silver, just like this. And if people aren't holding onto actual silver, what do they have? Well, instead, they just have paper promises to pay, because that's what's behind a dollar. It's just a promise that that dollar is going to be worth something. So instead, you need to hold something like a precious metal. Now, for me, a precious metal can be lead. That's the bullets that you use to keep your family safe, to hunt with, whatever you want to do with. That could be the brass. That brass goes into the casings that makes those kinetic projectile tools actually worth something more than just a awkward but heavy metal hammer. And that's holding on to a commodity. Now, your commodity that you have could be the food that you stock. It could be the money that you put away, even though if it is in paper dollars like that, its value is going to become devaluized over the next, 6 months, 6 years? And that's the thing. You're never going to know. You're going to wake up one day and that money is worth less than it is yesterday. Let's face it. As soon as this inflation started going up, what is that, a year ago, 2 years ago, our money, what used to be $1, became worth 70 cents. And it's hard for a lot of people to realize that that happened because when they think about it, when they go to the bank, they can still get 100 fake pennies for it, which isn't the copper that it used to be. Or they can get 10 fake dimes, which isn't the silver that it used to be. And so they think that this dollar is still worth the same amount of money. But when you go into the store and you actually try to use it, this dollar is only worth 70 cents because with 30% inflation, it doesn't have the same purchasing or the same buying power that it used to. Now, you're still getting paid the same amount that you used to. The people who you're performing services for are still paying you the same amount, but your money is worth less. More than 1/3 of the desks inside of offices around our entire world are unoccupied 7 days a week. We have broken this system, according to economists that are reporting to economic outlets like Bloomberg. Russian sources back to the conflict claim that drones that were launched against the state were launched from the territory of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. Now, if Russia responds to this, which they have the legal right to, this will trigger an Article 5 reaction from NATO. Now, what that means for anybody who may be new to the military theater, who may be new to this world conflict, what that means is an Article 5 reaction allows all of NATO, and not just allows it, it forces it. It forces all of the NATO allied nations to react to that attack as one. And so you have an immediate integration of a global conflict. And when you break it down into kind of a personal term, if you have somebody that cares for you, let's say inside of your house, whether husband, wife, brother, sister, whatever it is, and somebody comes against you inside of your house, that person is obligated by your blood to protect you. It's the same thing with NATO. They're obligated, but this by economic contract, by defensive contracts, by all these different laws, they are obligated to act as one. Now, we're seeing strategists say that Moscow would be absolute glass within hours of this taking place. But it's huge because with Russia claiming that these attacks came from inside of Latvia, inside of Lithuania, this means that other countries are actively engaging against this nation. Now, we're seeing the UNGA president say that the world is on the brink of a nuclear catastrophe. We are closer than at any time before in our history, and they warn that these weapons will drive the situation out of control. The UN General Assembly president has warned that the rest of the world must begin to prepare because through a lack of preparation, they will not know what to do. And with that, we have the entire understanding of our community. We want to remain aware of the things that are going on in the world around us, and we want to prepare to the best of our abilities. That means putting a little bit of food away, making sure that you're in an economic position that you can make moves when moves are needed. That means having the tools that are necessary to protect your family, and start talking with them right now about what's going on, because you don't know when it's going to be too late to discuss these things with them. I want to thank you guys for being here with us today, and